I'm going to break down the real price we pay for greed, and trust me, it's not just about money. Greed is everywhere. We see it in the way people behave, in the decisions they make, and in the consequences that follow. It's a pervasive force that can consume us, often without us even realizing it. But what is greed, really? Is it just about wanting more, or is it something deeper, more primal? I think it's a bit of both. Greed can be a driving force that pushes us to achieve great things, but it can also be a destructive vice that ruins lives and relationships. In today's world, where consumption and materialism are encouraged from a young age, it's no wonder that greed has become a part of our DNA. We're constantly bombarded with messages telling us that we need the latest gadgets, the trendiest clothes, and the biggest houses. And we buy into it, literally. When we let greed guide our decisions, it can lead to some pretty serious consequences. For individuals, it can lead to anxiety, stress, and a sense of emptiness that can never be filled. We start to lose sight of what's truly important, like relationships, health, and happiness. The effects of greed on communities are just as devastating. It can create economic inequality, perpetuate systemic injustices, and fuel social unrest. We see it in the way corporations prioritize profits over people, in the way governments prioritize power over welfare. When we prioritize greed over ethics, we create a world where the ends justify the means. We justify corruption, exploitation, and discrimination, all under the guise of progress and growth. But what kind of progress is it, really, when it comes at the expense of our humanity? We've all heard the phrase absolute power corrupts absolutely. But I think it's more than that. Absolute greed corrupts absolutely. It's a slippery slope that can lead even the most well-intentioned individuals down a path of destruction. Take, for example, the tech industry. On the surface, it's all about innovation and disruption, but scratch beneath the surface and you'll find a culture of greed that prioritizes growth over responsibility. Companies are willing to do whatever it takes to stay ahead, even if it means exploiting users' data or ignoring their welfare. The same can be said of the financial industry. The pursuit of profit is so relentless that it's led to some of the biggest economic crises in history. And yet, we still reward greedy behavior with bonuses and bailouts. Historically, we've seen greed play out in some pretty dramatic ways. From the robber barons of the Gilded Age to the dictators of the 20th century, greed has been the driving force behind some of humanity's darkest moments. But what about the media's role in all of this? Do they perpetuate greed by glorifying wealth and success, or do they hold us accountable for our actions? The answer is both. On the one hand, they give us a platform to understand the consequences of greed, but on the other hand, they also contribute to the cult of celebrity and the worship of wealth. So, what drives greed? Is it a psychological flaw, or is it something deeper? I think it's a bit of both. On one hand, our brains are wired to respond to rewards and avoid punishment, which can lead us to pursue wealth and status at any cost. But on the other hand, I think it's also a reflection of our deeper desires and fears. Greed can be a way to compensate for feelings of inadequacy or insecurity. It can be a way to prove ourselves to others, or to ourselves. But ultimately, it's a hollow pursuit that leaves us feeling empty and unfulfilled. Let me tell you a story. I knew someone who was a high-flying executive, making millions of dollars a year. But despite all the wealth and success, they were miserable. They were constantly stressed, anxious, and lonely. And one day, they realized that it was all because of their greed. They had sacrificed their relationships, their health, and their happiness on the altar of success. That's the true cost of greed. It's not just about the money, it's about the relationships we ruin, the lives we destroy, and the values we compromise. It's about the very fabric of our humanity. So, what can we do about it? First, we need to recognize the dangers of greed and acknowledge its presence in our own lives. We need to take a step back and reevaluate our priorities, our values, and our motivations. We need to create a world where success is measured not by wealth, but by happiness, health, and relationships. A world where greed is not rewarded, but rather, where ethics and compassion are prized above all else. In conclusion, the true cost of greed is far greater than we ever imagined. It's a cost that we pay every day, in every decision we make, and in every action we take. So, let's make a conscious choice to prioritize our humanity over our greed. Let's create a world where we can thrive, not just survive. If you like this video, be sure to check out our next video on the importance of ethics in business. And don't forget to share your thoughts on greed in the comments below.